Netflix's Black Cleopatra docudrama prompts enraged Egyptian broadcaster to make its own Cleopatra doc in which she will be light-skinned. By Nick Vivarelli, published on Variety.com on May 10th, 2023. If you're new to my channel, I'll introduce myself. My name is Simon Hill. Thanks for coming here. Click the like button, subscribe, leave a comment, all that. I run the rawest, realest, blackest YouTube channel in the world. And on my channel, I talk about a variety of things related to global anti-blackness, the fight against white supremacy, and Blacksit, which is the movement of black diasporans primarily living in Western countries who seek better opportunities in other countries around the world because of how those countries treat their citizens, primarily their black citizens, and also to protest how those governments act around the world and within their own borders. So I started my channel primarily by talking about my experiences living in a North African Arab country, much like Egypt, called Tunisia. I lived in Tunisia for about 2.5 years, and while I do not purport to be an expert on all things related to North Africa and the Arab world, I do have more of an insight than most other people who come on YouTube and talk about things related to Arabs, North Africa, and that sort of thing. On my channel, I usually don't talk about music, culture, films. I have in the past, but it's not really my interest. And there are other channels and places that do better takes on this. But I wanted to talk about it because it does relate to some things related to the fight against white supremacy abroad and how people in other parts of the world view blackness and themselves in relation to it. Specifically, in particular, in this case, people in Northern Africa. So let's get into the story. I'll give my takes as we go. A government-owned Egyptian broadcaster has responded to controversy over the casting of a black actress to play Cleopatra in the Netflix docudrama series African Queens, which streams from May 10th by announcing production of its own big-budget Cleopatra doc. When this trailer dropped a few, weeks ago, if I remember, there was a lot of talk about it on Twitter and other parts of social media about how finally there was black representation for this African queen. Now, historians, Egyptologists, anthropologists, archaeologists, right now in this part of history have concluded that Egypt was ruled by a foreign dynasty at this time that had its roots in Macedonia and Greece. And at this time in history, most mainstream historians and Egyptologists concluded that the Ptolemaic dynasty and Cleopatra were descended from white European Macedonians, right? Which is something that we agree on right now, though in the future in history, this could change as new discoveries are made, because history is not something that's written in stone. It's discovered over time, and we can recontextualize history all the time, right? This is how we look at different parts of history as time progresses, and new discoveries can be made about history which change how we view the past, and this is done all the time. But as of right now, most mainstream historians conclude she was white, though there is some debate about how white she was, if she would be considered white by today's standards, and that sort of thing. I'll continue reading. The fact that Britain's Adele James, who is of mixed heritage, plays the first-century Egyptian ruler as a queen with African roots in the Netflix original produced by Jada Pinkett Smith has been sparking an uproar in Egypt. It's not not a coincidence. Anything related to Jada always causes uproar. Ever since the trailer dropped last month, local academics and others are claiming that Cleopatra, who was born in the Egyptian city of Alexandria in 69 BC and belonged to a Greek-speaking dynasty, was of European descent and not black. So, for a lot of people, when they, see other peoples, particularly black Americans and black diasporans, cling to the legacy of ancient Egypt, it's because of what happened to us in history. It's not a mystery at this point now what happened when we were captured from Africa and transported across the world to various places and parts. We were stripped of everything: our identity, our language, our cultures, our religion. And so now we're this mixed bag of all these different forces that have acted upon us in history. These black Africans with European names, speaking European languages, with European religions that are foreign to us. And now we are trying, or at least for a good part of a century, have been trying to reclaim some African identity and reaching for ancient Egypt, and to have a part of that legacy has always been a part of it. There have been academics in my community who have, for many years push the idea that ancient Egypt, for its thousands of years of history, was a totally black society that was very influenced by the Nubians and the Sudanese in the south and that sort of thing, and it was primarily a black civilization up until the Arab conquest or different variations of that history, right? So there's always been this legacy in black thought to try to reclaim some of Egypt, right? Which rightly we do have some claim to it. It's impossible to say that Egypt was totally a black civilization for all of its time, and it's impossible to say that it was a non-black or more white adjacent civilization as well. All right, let's continue. In response to what they claim is Netflix's falsification of Egypt's history, the Al Wathaqiya channel, which is a subsidiary of Egypt's state-affiliated United Media Services, has announced start of a production on a high-end doc about the true story of Queen Cleopatra, which it claims in a statement is based on the utmost levels of research and accuracy. Now, I have not been to Egypt, though I did plan on going last year. I paid the $25 to get the tourist visa to go to Egypt, but I decided not to at the last minute to instead travel with my wife. I don't want to travel anywhere without her. I love my wife with all my heart, and so I wouldn't want to go somewhere to a foreign country without her with me. So that's the only reason I didn't decide to go to Egypt, but I do plan on traveling there in the future, right? In many countries in North Africa and the Arab world, there is pervasive anti-blackness. This is something that that goes without saying. It's been undisputed, right? You don't have to believe me. You can go watch other YouTube channels interviewing black people who are indigenous to those countries about their experiences there. You can read books about it. You can find articles about it. The question should not be, is Egypt an anti-black country, but how much anti-blackness exists within that country, because anti-blackness is the default across the world, and white supremacy reigns supreme in the minds and hearts of people everywhere in the world. So it's not surprising to me that Egypt, which has a very extensive, of course, Egyptology industry where they're trying to always promote this ancient culture to bring in tourism, has a very, very strong historical academia that is built around, studying ancient Egypt, trying to preserve its identity or preserve its image across the world. And so when this American foreign media is projecting this image to this country, about this country around the world, it's not surprising that their media would have this reaction. There's the point of view that I am sympathetic towards because I'm against American media hegemony and how people are tricked into believing so many things around the world because of American imperialism with in terms of media that America tends to view or tends to skew other people's history to fit its narrative at a certain time, right? Not saying that this is like some conspiracy, like there's people in the back room saying that we're going to make people think this about this country, but because of America's isolation from the rest of the world and because of our oversized influence in the media of the world, we're able to shape a lot of perceptions around the world and also have a distorted view at the same time because of our distance from many of these places. But let's continue reading. Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities, the government entity in charge of heritage, has complained on Twitter that statues of Queen Cleopatra confirm that she had Hellenistic or Greek features, distinguished by light skin, a drawn out nose, and thin lips. Now, I don't know how you can get skin tone from a statue, right, when many of these statues are now bleached from over time, so we don't know the exact skin tone of these people, but a drawn out nose and thin lips. These are features that you can find on some black Africans, right? If you go to Ethiopia, there are people with thin lips and long noses, or some Somalians have these features, though they're darker than me or the same shade as me and that sort of thing. So, black people, like all people across the world, have a variety of features. So just saying by the statues that she was definitely what we would consider today a white woman doesn't really influence me. But I'll concede the point. Maybe these probably more than maybe, but very likely these Egyptologists have a better understanding of of Egyptian history than I do. And that's fine. That's fine. I can concede that point. Because what I'm going to say later shows that none of this actually really matters. Popular comedian Bassem Youssef, in a recent TV interview with British journalist Piers Morgan, accused Netflix of trying to take over our Egyptian culture. And an Egyptian lawyer has filed a complaint demanding that legal measures are taken to block Netflix outright in Egypt to prevent the show from airing, though that has not happened, at least not yet. So, talking to Piers Morgan, a right wing guy who has said crazy things throughout the years regarding protecting British culture and the invasion of different cultures on Britain and that sort of thing, to this Egyptian man. Uh, this conversation is already starting off on a very bad foot on the right wing, on starting off on the bad foot, which is the right foot in this case. So, you know, I don't see this film, docuseries, show that Netflix is producing as inherently offensive to Egyptian culture. Because for the majority of time that Egypt has been portrayed in media, film, and books, there has been just white representation the entire time, or white adjacent representation. I'm sure Egypt produces its own movies about their ancient culture, and the people that they pick to play are majority of people that look like Egyptians today, or more fair-skinned people, right? And I'm pretty sure if we look through history at all the portrayals of Cleopatra and all the other pharaohs and dynasties and historical events that have happened in Egypt, there has been the portrayal of them mostly as white. So the production of just one film featuring a black actress projecting Cleopatra as a dark skinned person isn't just going to totally shake or break the narrative, right, of what Egypt has been produced, has been shown as for decades now, So I think that's the funny part. The funny part also is that this lawyer wants to try to ban this movie in Egypt, which is funny, that they would try to ban the movie just because they have a black actress, right? Who knows? It might be more historically accurate than a lot of other movies because a lot of movies take liberty when it comes to teaching history. But the fact that they decided to make the character black in this one is now a big deal, right? I'll continue. Why do some people need Cleopatra to be white? The show's director, Tina Garavi, wrote in an op-ed piece defending the casting and variety online last month. Perhaps it's not just that I've directed a series that portrays Cleopatra as black, but that I have asked Egyptians to see themselves as Africans, and they are furious at me for that. So, there's a lot to break down here. There is a lot to break down here when it comes to this paragraph, and I find this to be the most interesting paragraph here. So, why do some people need Cleopatra to be white? Well, there is, because white supremacy affects the minds of people, the closeness to whiteness is viewed as a closeness to luxury, wealth, status, and privilege. So, if you're an Egyptian and you've been shown these images of white success and white glory throughout history, which the majority of people are shown, this is why many people, worship white skin, blonde eyes, blue hairs, and these sorts of features, and why many people are emigrating to Europe. If you go to Africa, many people say that they want to emigrate to Europe, not only because of the higher standard of living, but because it's perceived as a place that's better than their countries of origin. Even if the stats of some of these countries compared to others are not true, and if we know also at the same time that racism pervades in these countries and that there are many poor people in these countries in Europe that these people want to immigrate to, that doesn't matter because these countries are white, they're European, they're supposed to be of the highest status of civilization, so they're the ones we need to be like and be near. So there is some push always to make anything closer to whiteness, in proximity to whiteness, right? Let's break down the second part of that quote. Perhaps it's not just that I've directed a series that portrays Cleopatra as black, but that I have asked Egyptians to see themselves as Africans, and they are furious at me for that. I have a problem with this quote because I think it conflates Africanness with blackness, and this is one of my biggest problems, and some black people might attack me for this, but an African identity is not inherently a black identity. I want to repeat that. An African identity is not inherently a black identity. First and foremost, black is a social construct. Race, as it exists, as we know it, is not real. It is a social construct. We've all been force fed this belief that there is an inherent difference between people based on the color of their skin and their phenotypical features, which is not true. There's no difference between me and the average Chinese person or white person genetically. Only the differences in our skin. There's no difference in intelligence and character and moral behavior, anything like that, right? Africanness as an identity is based on your geography, and many parts of Africa are not what we considered majority black. Morocco, Libya, Algeria, Tunisia, parts of Mauritania, some people might even say parts of northern Sudan, that sort of thing. These places are not all black, but there's this disconnect in the discourse about African identity that conflates it with blackness. And there's two parts to that. Because black people are the majority of the African continent, the idea is that, well, African identity is inherently a black identity. But that's like saying, in my opinion, that an American identity is inherently a white identity because white people are the majority across the Americas. No, no. I reject all forms of identity based on the majority of people, right? Especially of geographic spaces. It's a identity based on the land that you are born on. There are some white South Africans who claim an African identity, and they have more African identity than they have more claim to an African identity than I do. I am not inherently uh, uh, forced to take on an African identity just because I am a black person. No, it's a mindset. It's a mindset. It's where you're born. It's where you're from. It's what you cherish, and it's based on your value system. I've said multiple times, and if you don't believe it, I'll say it again here. I am a globalist. I don't believe in borders. I don't believe in people being defined by their geography. But if you do claim a geography, you should be able to have it and claim it as part of your identity and not be denied it just because you don't fit the narrative of what the people perceive that identity to be. For example, if I were to live or if I were born in, let's say, Egypt, right? And the majority of Egyptians are not black, and people in Egypt denied me my Egyptian identity by saying, you're not a real Egyptian, you're a Sudanese, you're something like that. That would hurt, and that's wrong. People should be able to claim their identity because of what they feel inside. That's how I honestly feel. So an African identity is not inherently a black identity. Black identity is something that is foisted upon people based upon their perceptions of them. You see a black person. You see a black person, you feel African, and you identify as African based on your values, whether that be the geography of where you were born or where you live now, and the values you hold. Maybe you have pan-Africanist views. Maybe you have nationalistic views about a certain African country. If you're from Nigeria and you are a Nigerian nationalist, an identity that I totally disagree with. I disagree with all forms of nationalism, but if that is a type of African identity. And that identity that you're claiming is no different than an Egyptian identity, holding on to that and saying that I am Egyptian and also African. And we do not need to divorce those two things, because divorcing those two things leads to not it's not the only reason, because anti-blackness did not start with black people, right? But it leads to more anti-blackness because a lot of North Africans feel like they cannot claim their African identity because other black Africans tell them that you're not really African. There have been people who have told me I never really spent time in Africa because I spent 2.5 years of my life living in North Africa among what they call Mazungus or white people. The fuck? The fuck? I spent more time in Africa than most people who are not Africans. I've spent more time in Africa than most people who are not Africans. And there are people who will say that Tunisia is not really African. Though when I go to Tanzania, Kenya, Mauritius, the same bullshit that I saw in Tunisia, I see there in those third world countries as well. So there's no difference. There's no difference. There's no difference. In North Africa, they deal with poverty, corruption, corrupt leaders, bad infrastructure, just the same as they deal with in Kenya and Tanzania. They both have rich cultural heritage. They both value their indigenous language and their histories. How is there any different just because one is made up of people that you presume to be white? Because other white people don't view North Africans as white. So they're trying to join the club away from black African identity because other black Africans tell them they're not black. And of course, white people are telling them they're not white. So they tend to skew towards the Arab world in their perception and view of themselves. But the point I'm making is this. If we are going to have a pan-Africanist identity, or support Pan-Africanism, we cannot continue to say that, Egyptians don't see themselves as Africans because they don't see their themselves as black, or their historical figures as black, or their leaders as black. That's impossible, and it's ridiculous, because that would make us no different than the fascists, the Nazis, the white supremacists, who say that an identity should be based on race, skin color, and that sort of thing. I'm not attacking this woman, Tina Garavi, who directed this and made this quote, because I'm not trying to say that anti-blackness started from black people. Just because some black people say that North Africans are not black, therefore they don't have a black identity, that causes the black backlash to Pan-Africanism, or fights against white supremacy, or black and Arab unity, or anything like that. I'm not saying that this idea is the cause of that, because it all starts with white supremacy, but it is a big thing that we have to fight against. Egyptians are Africans, and yes, hypothetically, they should view themselves as Africans. Though this is a point foreign to me, because I don't believe in borders or nationalism. We're all humans, and we need to have a global, unified human civilization, in my opinion. But if we are to have these divorced from each other nation states and identities, or pan continental ideals, then we shouldn't discount people based on how they look, right? And that goes both ways. That goes both ways. Egyptians should not deny their Africanness, or their roots to African civilization that has been spawned from black people, and black people, and black Africans who are not Egyptian, or who live in majority black countries, should not deny North Africans their African identity in the same way. There needs to be Pan-African unity when it comes to that. I hope that's very clear. That was a very long-winded response, but I had to get to that. Netflix has repeatedly declined to comment. And that's the end of the article. Let's go back up here to Cleopatra herself, right? There has been, like I said, a constant push in black thought, black historical thought, to gain some dignity by claiming our history again, because so much of it was taken from us during centuries, and still ongoing now, centuries of enslavement, colonization, and the destruction of our minds, souls, and spirits, right? So claiming the legacy of ancient Egypt right now in black history has been a constant, right? And this is not new. I grew up hearing stories and hearing about historians who spoke about an all black Egyptian civilization that lasted for thousands of years, and other African civilizations in various parts and pockets that was destroyed or lost over time, and this information has been hidden from us. But I want to say very clearly, and this is probably the most important part: nobody should be worshiping or admiring kings, queens, emperors, empresses from the past. These people are inherently fucked up. They're inherently fucked up people. If you are a king, or if you were an ancient ruler, if you were the emperor of a grand, glorious empire in the past, your power back then I cannot speak. Your power demanded of you to dominate and rule over other people with viciousness and violence that it would be unheard of to us today. We think what's going on in Ukraine is bad. Imagine ancient wars where people were fighting with swords and sticks and bow and arrows, gouging out each other's eyes, mummifying each other alive, burning each other at the stake, that sort of thing. Every civilization in the past that was dominated by these authoritarian sick fucks were sick people, and they're not to be lauded. They're not to be looked up to. It's like the way I look at ancient Egypt and all these ancient civilizations that people try to push on black people to say that we had a glorious past. I look at these people as if, like, hundreds of years from now, when we're trying to teach about the glories of black people, we put up on the screen Idi Amin, right? I view Cleopatra and all these other people like Idi Amin or Papa Doc in Haiti, or any other black genocidal warlord figure that you can think of right now. Or wasn't there a president of Chad that went to jail for war crimes at the Hague and things like that? What I'm saying is, these leaders are not good people to vaunt. The real people that we should admire in history are the ones who are lost to us in time because they didn't have all the money and power, because they were illiterate. The ancient Egyptians who worked day in day out backbreaking labor in the fields and in the streets, and as sellers and vendors, and the prostitutes, and the just all the low people, because the majority of people of them were illiterate and poor and had no social standing and that sort of thing. I think about those people in the past. Cleopatra or King Tut and all the other pharaohs didn't build the pyramids. We say that in time, looking back now, but they weren't the guys who built the pyramids. The people who built the pyramids were the regular broke Egyptians back then. And those are the people we should be remembering. We shouldn't be fighting over the identity of some woman who lived thousands of years ago, had people work as slaves for her, didn't care about anything other than preserving her prestige, wealth, and power, and say that this is somebody that we should admire as black people. I hate the talk that we always talk about kings and queens. We come from kings and queens. No, we came from regular, normal people who got caught up in a fucked up situation and transported across the world, and now we're the descendants of those people trying to rebuild ourselves and our lives and just survive in that sort of thing. So once again, maybe I lost you when I just started ranting about prostitutes, but I get a bit hot when I start talking about this stuff. But I want to make this very clear, very clear. If we were to go back in time and we were to be in ancient Egypt, that place was ran like a mafia state. There was a family on top that had all the money and all the power. Then they had a periphery of people around them who got a little slice of the power and prestige. Then they had a periphery of people around them who protected those people who got a slice of the power and prestige. And their job was to relegate everybody else in that society to the very bottom to just work for them and have no money and no power and just essentially be slaves to the state. This is what every ancient empire was. And there's nothing glorious about that. There's nothing great about that. Nobody, and everybody will kill me and crucify me for this, but I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck, honestly. If you are worshiping people in your past who did horrible things, who subjugated other people, fought and killed other people for land and power, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? In Black American thought, we don't look up to the slave holding first presidents and founding fathers. No, we don't look up to those people. Why? Because we know that those people literally were talking about freedom on one hand and subjugating people on the other. It goes the same for ancient Egypt. It goes the same for ancient Axum. It goes the same for all those other African civilizations, European civilizations, Asian civilizations, ancient North American and South American civilizations. All empires are bad. All empires are bad. Emperors are bad. And there's no reason to look up to Cleopatra as a hero. So the point is this: if she's not a hero and nothing about her is worth preserving, what does it matter if she's white or black? Honestly, as black people, we shouldn't want Cleopatra to be white, to be black. We shouldn't want Cleopatra to be black, because Cleopatra herself in her time wouldn't give a fuck about black people. It's not like Cleopatra's legacy is that she tried to liberate the slaves in Egypt. I'm not saying all the slaves in Egypt were black, but it's not like Cleopatra's legacy is that she tried to, fight for the working class people in her country, to give more money to the people, to dismantle the patriarchal empire and monarchy that she was born into. No, her legacy is that she tried to seize the power of Rome, or that she tried to make her empire even more glorious, which in turn would have just made her family and herself more powerful and glorious. There's nothing worthy about looking up to these people. There's nothing worthy about looking up to rich, powerful people who got their wealth and power at the back, on the backs of others. So fuck Cleopatra, honestly. Who gives a fuck if they portray her as black or white? Now, this is the part of the video where I know some people are typing either very angry at me, or they're typing the obvious stupid response. Well, Simon, if they made a movie about, let's say, Frederick Douglass, and they made him a white man, wouldn't you be upset? Or if they made a movie about Martin Luther King and made him an Arab man, would that make you upset? They made a movie about any other important black figure, Kwame Nkrumah, whatever, and made them a white man, would that make you upset? Please understand that double standards do exist in the world, and they exist for a reason. They exist because not all situations are equal. Black people have historically been an oppressed group of people all across the world, particularly in North Africa, where slavery ran for centuries during the Arab slave trade as well. Uh, Changing black history, changing figures in black history is like picking on or picking on people who have had nothing. We don't make fun of disabled people. We don't make fun of or provoke or antagonize people who have been oppressed because we realize that if we were in those shoes, that we would not want to be denigrated in such a way. Some people will say, well, in the oppression Olympics, Arabs and black people are both dealing with the same thing. There's the perception of Arabs as terrorists, and there's perceptions of black people as X, Y, and Z. The Arabs and other groups of people have been able to preserve their history. They've been able to preserve their lineage, and they have a true legacy that they can reach back to. Meanwhile, black diasporans in the Americas really have nothing that we have clinged on to from before our enslavement. So the heroes that we've created and crafted for ourselves now are true historical figures that mean something to us, and their blackness is really a part of their identity, which led them to do great things. That's why you can't have a movie where Harriet Tubman is a white person, because white people weren't enslaved. So then would it make sense for a white woman to come running down to free what, other black people? Maybe that did happen hypothetically in history. Anything could have happened that we don't know about that hasn't been discovered yet, but it wouldn't make sense. It would make sense for Martin Luther King to be a black man in a movie or in a TV show because his black identity was really a part of what motivated him to fight in the civil rights movement. And also, like, we only have 4 or 5 real heroes that we can really talk about. Why are white people or other people insisting that they should be white people in movies, right? Like, seriously, you guys have a lot of people that are up for debate, and some of them, honestly, you shouldn't want, like Cleopatra, right? Like James Bond, like Idris Elba petitioning to play James Bond. Nobody should be trying to portray images of black people as leaders or agitators or a part of power structures which are inherently bad, right? There shouldn't be a black James Bond because James Bond is inherently a bad character. He's a force of oppression against the developing world by a former colonial master, MI6, a part of the British government, right? Cleopatra is the figurehead, or was a figurehead, of an ancient empire, which didn't give a fuck about its citizens, didn't give a fuck about anything other than staying in power and hoarding wealth for itself, which is why she can put a two-snaked crowned thing on her light-skinned mini afro. Like, come on, bro. This is what I'm just trying to say. Cleopatra and all this other stuff shouldn't matter to us. As black people, we have enough. We have some heroes that we can look towards as validations of our existence. Yes, our history is rich and deep, and it does go back further than slavery, and we should reach back and learn about it, but we should not aggrandize it. We should not admire empires or kings and that sort of thing. And that's the thing I'm getting at. If Egypt or Egyptians want to have a white Cleopatra in their minds and in their media because they view the white Cleopatra as an example of beauty, prestige, and privilege, let them have it. Let them be confused by the forces of white supremacy and deluded. Let them have that. We need to fight against that, but fighting against that is not just putting a black face on it, even though it might be a hilarious troll, and even though it might piss them off and they might ban Netflix in their country and show them how anti-black they are. It's pretty fucking funny. But we don't fight white supremacy this way, just by slapping black faces on everything. The solution to fighting white supremacy is not global miscegenation. If everybody was mixed or whatever, that's not going to fix it. The fight is not slapping black faces in high places, having black presidents or black CEOs and that sort of thing. It's not about just putting mixed characters of different races and ethnicities all in media. That's not it. It's about dismantling capitalism, fighting against the forces that push these images that are negative. Fighting against negative images is how we get rid of it. And also at the same time, realizing that these nationalistic borders and clinging to these identities also foster the forces that are negative towards our fellow man. And that's the point I'm trying to make. I hope all of this made sense here. I was ranting a little bit, but I felt it was really important to talk about this and get this clear and get all of this clear. So I hope this Netflix documentary is a big success. I'm interested to see what will happen. I don't know if I'll watch it because honestly, I don't really care about ancient Egypt and that sort of thing. I'm more concerned about the future of our people and how we guarantee a better world for all people on this planet by fighting the forces that keep us poor, that keep us having to struggle to pay the rent, having to struggle to buy food, and that sort of thing. I'm not focused on what Netflix is doing and that sort of thing, and I'm not focused on looking towards the past of ancient empires and seeing myself in them, when most likely if I went back in time I wouldn't be anywhere near the top, right, of that society. So that's all I have to say, really. I hope this all made sense. I hope you enjoyed this video. Hit the like button, subscribe, share, leave a comment. My name is Simon Hill, and peace.